Hello and welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I'm your host Deepak. I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Pia Lauritzen, the esteemed Danish philosopher and academic, to our podcast today. With 5 impactful books under her belt, Dr. Lauritzen's work examines the profound role of questions in shaping leadership, technology, and cultural diversity. Her innovative ideas earned her a spot on the Thinkers 50 radar list in 2023. In this episode, we will dive into her compelling book Questions, brief books about big ideas, and explore the transformative power of questioning. Dr. Pia, it's a true delight to have you on this podcast. We are thrilled and honored to have you with us today.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Dr. Pia, why do people ask questions and what motivates our curiosity and need for understanding?
Yeah, so I think you can answer that question on several levels, because people have very different reasons for asking questions and different purposes in different situations. But typically, to give people an overview of how to maybe think and talk about questions, I try to identify three basic purposes for asking questions. And it's very human, basic human behavior, actually. So we ask questions because we are trying to find our place in this world. So the first thing is that when I ask a question, I do so to find out where I am, where I'm supposed to be, where I should go, and how I find myself in this world. So that's the first reason for asking questions, an individual perspective, you could say. The second reason or purpose for asking questions is to connect with other human beings. So when we ask a question, we invite someone else to join us in navigating our life and our work and this world that we are both part of. So connecting with another human being or connecting with other groups of people is the second reason. And finally, there's a third purpose for asking questions, and that is to commit to a shared goal somehow. So when I ask you a question, we connect with each other, and at the same time, we direct our attention to the same thing at the same time. So there's this, usually I visualize it with a triangle. So there's me, there's you, and then there's the world we share or the purpose we share or understanding the world we're both part of. So these are the three basic human, you could say, features, but also drivers in asking questions.
Yeah, thank you. Would you mind sharing what inspired you to write this book?
I think it was a lot of questions that I've been asking myself. It was part of a research project at the time I wrote the book. I was doing postdoctoral studies at a university here in Denmark. So I had received a grant to find out what is the basic nature of questions and how do they impact, especially how do they impact people differently in different parts of the world. So I was doing studies of school classes, a Chinese, a Russian, a Spanish, and a Danish school class to find out, do we raise our children to think about questions and to use questions differently in different parts of the world? And my research showed that we certainly do. We do use questions differently, and we do have different understandings of questions. And at the same time, my kids were not that old at the time. So I had children in the house asking a lot of questions all the time. And being a philosopher myself, studying philosophy and reading these big thinkers throughout history, for me, it's all about the questions. And then I found by doing research that not that many people have studied questions for the sake of questions. Then maybe you write a book about questioning as a tool, or questioning on how to ask great interview questions like you're doing right now, or how to use questions to do a survey, or how to use questions to get the right answers. But there are actually not that many people who have cared about questions just for the sake of questions, just to figure out what do they tell us about ourselves and each other. So I wanted to do that. I wanted to shed light on these blind spots that comes with questions.
Very insightful, Dr. Pia. Thank you so much. Why do you think questioning is a fundamental aspect of human cognition and communication?
Questioning is very much about addressing that there are things we don't know. So to ask a question, you have to acknowledge that there's something here lacking. I don't know everything there is to know, so I need to ask a question. So human cognition and human knowledge is what we want, is what we strive for. But at the same time, it's basic human that we don't know everything. So questions become key in bridging this gap between what we don't know and what we want to know. So that's a short answer to why questions are very essential when trying to understand human cognition.
Yeah. How can one person effectively connect with another by asking questions? And what role do questions play in building rapport and understanding?
I think maybe tying back to your first question, I think that the first thing you can do when you want to connect with another human being is actually to be aware that by asking a question, you are making a decision on what to focus on. So if you truly want to connect with someone, typically it might be counterintuitive, but typically it actually makes sense to pause for a moment and be curious about, I wonder what this person would ask. I wonder if this person has something they are curious about or they want to explore with me before just starting to ask a lot of questions. Because if you start by asking a lot of questions, there is a risk that you will never get to the point where the person you're talking to can share what's truly on her or on his mind. So to use questions to connect with other people, we should actually be able to put our own need for knowledge on hold, I would say. And that's a lesson I learned also by being a mother, where if you ask a lot of questions all the time, then at some point your kids will just say, well, back off. I don't want to answer all these questions. I don't want to be interrogated by my own mother. I don't want to be interrogated by my friend. I want to be able to stay here with our shared ignorance and then explore it together. So being comfortable with the uncomfortable silence of just being together is a great way to kick off a connection, I think.
Yeah. In your TEDx talk, you had mentioned about asking well-intended questions. So why do people ask well-intended questions, and what drives their desire to seek clarity and understanding through such inquiries?
I think at least in my part of the world, now I'm aware that you're coming from a different part of the world, so it's very likely that it's different. But at least in my part of the world, this Northern European, Scandinavian part of the world, we've been taught that it's rude to tell other people what we think they should do. Instead, we've been taught that it's better to ask a question. And I think that's a bit mistaken, because then we just use questions to tell other people what we would like them to do. And I actually don't think that's quite fair, because it's disguising what we think ourselves. So it's a way of saying, I would really like you to do this, but I don't feel comfortable saying that, so I ask you a question. And that's what I mean in the TED Talk about well-intended questions, that I'm sure people do this because they want to help. They want to give you good advice. They know something that they think you can benefit from knowing. But in disguising their advice as a question, they're actually making it harder for the other person to have an opinion themselves, and to make up their own minds about whether it is or is not relevant. So I think we do that. In terms of clarity, I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable with ignorance, uncomfortable with admitting that they don't know and there's something they don't know. So we want to learn how to ask questions, to stay in control, to plan things, to manage, to so we can stay on top of everything. But the truth about questions is that they are really, really good at helping people think clearly, but that's not necessarily the same thing as being able to say things clearly. Sometimes you need to think through things, and it can be very messy and a lot of unanswered questions, but you have to ask them in order to think more clearly. And I would like to help myself and others make more room for that, to nurture the clear thinking over the clear talking, because the clear talking, it's just talking about what we already know. And I think it's more interesting to talk about what we don't know yet, but we're just about to get there, maybe.
Yeah. Why do often people fail to, fail to listen, experiences, ideas, and what factors contribute to our selective hearing and understanding? Because it's a part of the communication process. Asking question is also, correlation between the communication between one and another.
Yeah, of course. Can you give me an example of, do you have some experience with this? Can you please give me an example of what you're thinking?
Yeah. So basically, when my daughter asked me about, something, and then, in my subconscious mind, or, if I busy somewhere else, then I fail to understand, and, I fail to communicate with her the proper response. So why do, we basically fail to listen people about
Yeah.
their, when they ask about ideas and thoughts, if they want to share something. And what are the factors basically, when we hear something and then we understand and then we communicate?
Yes. I think you actually just gave part of the answer, because we're busy minds. We have so much going on in our own mind. So making room for other people's thoughts is actually hard work. Um, and I think we have to make the decision to do that work. And your example with your daughter, I think these are our kids are actually the people where we do make that room from time to time, because that's part of our job. We cannot be good parents if we never listen to them. So these are actually the people where we prioritize to make that room sometimes. But a lot of other people at work, in the supermarket, talking with friends maybe, or distant family, sometimes we forget to tell ourselves, I need to make room in my own mind in order to make room for other people's thoughts. Because otherwise it's just busy, busy, busy noise. There's so much going on. And we know that I think sometimes we think that we can understand each other fully. Say, okay, if I just listen carefully, I will understand everything there is to know about Deepak. But that's, of course we cannot. We are mysteries to each other. And we have to be open to that mystery. We have to be willing to just let ourselves be inspired by whatever comes, because sometimes people don't know what they want to tell us when they start talking. So we have to be patient, and we have to make room for them to explore their own thinking in the company of us. By exploring their own thinking, we will be better at thinking as well.
Yeah, very insightful. Uh, how is our body language connected to the questions we intend to ask? And what impact does it have communication and interpretation?
So what was the first part again?
How is our body language connected to the
Body
questions?
language. Yes.
Yeah, body
Yes.
language.
I think that actually body language and questions, they are very closely related. There is a German phenomenologist from way back. He said, his name is Strauss, Erwin Strauss. And he said that questions are as revealing as dreams, or even more so. And I think it's the same with body language. All the things that we cannot say clearly, we say with our body, we say with our gaze, the way we look at other people, the way we touch other people. And we say, by the way, we try to ask a question without really knowing where we're going yet. So I think it's very closely related. And I think to your previous question about listening, if we could tune in on the questions and on the body language, more than tuning in on the answers and what's actually being said with the words, we would be way better at understanding each other. Not that we would understand each other fully, but we would be better at connecting. So I think it's very closely related, questioning and body language.
Yeah. In your TEDx talk, you mentioned that questions separate people. So
Yeah.
could you elaborate on how you see this happening and underlying reasons for it?
Yes. So this has to do with what I call the monopolization of questions. That there is a very long tradition in the history of philosophy. It goes all the way back to Western philosophy. It goes all the way back to Plato. So 2,400 years or something. There is a tradition that we leave it to the wise people to ask questions. We leave it to the teacher, to the journalist, to the scientist, to the leader or the HR responsible, or the coach, psychologist. We leave it to the wise people to ask questions. And then everybody else are being respondents. So they should just answer to a survey or answer in an interview, or they should just come up with the answers. Also in exams, for instance, in education, you have a teacher telling people things and asking them test questions, and then the students, they just need to know all the answers. So this tradition of monopolizing the power of questions makes this this magic of connecting people. It does the exact opposite. It disconnects people. So some people think they are the ones to ask, and other people think they should only respond. And it makes one person a questioner, and groups of people are turned into these anonymous gray group of just being a large group of people who don't have their own mind, who don't have their own questions, who don't have their own ideas of how to talk about these things. They just say yes or no, or 1 out of 5, or they just come up with these. So that's when questioning, when you monopolize questions, then it disconnects people. So my mission, so to speak, is to democratize the power of question and making sure that everyone connects with their, you could call it their question mindset, their inner curiosity, their inner, also inner doubt and skepticism and wonder, because only by doing that we can use the positive power of questions and not being subjected to the negative power of questions. So I think what I'm basically saying is that questions are extremely powerful, and like any other power, it can be used for good or it could be used for bad. When you use it for good, you use it to connect with other people, commit to a shared purpose. When you use it for bad, you use it to manipulate other people. You use it to decide what's important and what's not important, what should be talked about and what should not be talked about. So that's what I mean with these. There are also always a shadow. When there's light, there's also shadow, right? So this is what I'm trying to explain.
Yeah. In a world of diverse personalities, including introverts, how can you engage someone effectively by asking the right kind of questions?
I don't believe in right kind of questions. I don't, in the sense that I don't think that I can give anyone 5 questions and say these will always work. But I do believe in in using a question mindset to be open to the fact that there's something you don't know. So maybe you get the feeling this is an introvert personality, but it might as well be the case that right now this person is simply not feeling comfortable sharing anything. It's not like she or he is necessarily introvert. It's just the culture in this room, or the environment in this room, or the environment between the two of you is not, in a way that makes this person open up. So I think by thinking about having a question mindset rather than asking the right questions, I think that you can be more conscious about how your way of being in the room, your presence, how you might change that a bit. Just, in the TED Talk, I also talk about thinking of questions as a dance. So instead of just, being the one taking all the steps forward all the time, maybe it's time to take a step back or take a step to the side, simply to see if I, also speaking of body language, if I change some of these things a bit, maybe this person will open more up, or I will find ways to connect with this person.
Yeah. How does the capacity to ask questions differentiate human beings from animals? And why, is this ability considered fundamental to our cognitive and social development?
Yeah, so I think, and also how I as you probably already know, because I can hear that you read some of the things I've been writing. I do think that questioning is a human superpower, one that distinguishes human beings from animals, and also from gods and AI and non-human entities. And the reason I do so is because I understand questioning as awareness of the fact that that we could stop being here. So it's this consciousness of being present, being in Denmark right now, not in India or in Germany, or having this consciousness of being someone who stays the same over time and still changes. So this self-consciousness that is very unique to humans. And I think it has to do with the fact that we know that we don't know. So an AI, for instance, or God, if you believe in God, they would be entities knowing all there is to know, or at least that would be their self, if they do have a self, their self conception, that they do have knowledge. And animals wouldn't think of themselves as having knowledge. They're just, they are instincts, and they are being, behaving according to circumstance. Well, we are kind of caught in the middle. Human beings, we know that we don't know. So this makes us ask questions. And that's why we are having these that we're having doubt and curiosities and wonders and skepticism, these basic human features that you don't see in an AI, for instance. You don't see this basic doubt. And in animals, it's not that they are being they can be afraid, or they can be courageous, and they can be all kinds of things, but it's not like they're pausing to reflect, was this the right thing to do? Should I do it differently at another time? So there are some basic human features that are very closely connected to asking questions.
Yeah. Do you believe that the ability to ask why is what truly defines human intelligence? And how does this capacity influence our behaviors, decisions, and interactions?
So why is an interesting question, because why is the only question that points in two directions. So when asking why, you can be asking about why something happened, so looking for a reason. But you can also ask why in order to understand a purpose, something pointing towards the future. And that makes the why question the only question that actually is giving us this extension in time. It's very closely connected to our temporality. Human beings, as a creature that is born into this world, live for a number of years and then dies. And we know of a past, and we care about history and traditions, and we know that if we don't make good decisions now, it will have an impact on our future. And even if we make good decisions, it will have impact on our future. So this consciousness of time is built into the why question. And in that sense, I would totally say that why, understood from, the broader perspective, not as did you ask a why question or did you ask a what question, but more in the broader sense of understanding why, it is definitely unique. You don't ask why to meet your basic needs. Then you ask, what should we eat for dinner? When you ask why, it's taking a step back, taking your time to reflect on a bigger purpose or bigger reason. So it is definitely closely connected to this higher level of consciousness that comes with being human. And now I forgot you had other questions as well built into that question. So please ask again if I didn't cover it.
No, that is fine. That that is extremely helpful and very well explained. Dr. Pia, my last question. How do you see the role of questions evolving in an age of where information is readily available and AI is becoming more integrated into our daily lives?
Yeah, so I think asking questions is more important than ever because now we are surrounded by technology that is designed to, sometimes I use the term deceive. It's designed to deceive us into thinking that it has all the answers, that no matter what we ask, it will come up, in a chatbot, or if we have a problem, it will offer solutions. It's not in an AI, it's not in the AI's nature to say, I don't know. Nobody knows. We will need to find ways to navigate this without knowing. It will be in science, in the interest of science and technology, is to find answers. Whereas in the interest of philosophers, and I would say most human beings, is to find ways to stay comfortable with not having answers. If we can navigate without having answers, we can endure everything. But if we can only navigate if we have answers, then we are putting a lot of limitations on ourselves. So I think, as I mentioned a few times, building this question mindset is extremely important right at the time we're living in. It has always been, but I think it's becoming even more important because we're surrounded by technology telling us, well, don't worry, we'll have the answer. When the truth of the fact is that no, we will never have all the answers. Every time we find an answer, we will have 10 billion other questions, and we need to find ways to be okay with that.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Pia Lauritzen for sharing her profound insight with us today. Her exploration on the role of questions in shaping our understanding of leadership, technology, and culture diversity is truly inspiring. We appreciate your time and the depth of knowledge you have brought to this discussion. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Pia. It has been a genuine pleasure to have you on the podcast, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the near future. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It has been a huge pleasure.